There's a Gemara. The Gemara tells us in one location that before a child is conceived, God pronounces on the droplet of semen the destiny of that child, whether it be wise, whether it be foolish, whether it be strong, whether it be weak, whether it'll be brilliant, whether it'll be wealthy or be poor. Every pronouncement is made on the destiny, regarding the destiny of that child. One pronouncement is not made. Tzaddik v'rosha. Will he be devoutly righteous? Will he be evil? Everything else is predetermined except one's spiritual destiny. One's spiritual destiny is up to each individual. And the Gemara concludes as Hakol bidei Shemayim chutz miYerushalayim. Everything is predestined except fear of God. To the degree that you fear Hashem, that will determine in what direction you go. Are you committed to the will of Hashem, of God, or you do as you choose? That's Hakol bidei Shemayim chutz miYerushalayim. That's what it's all about. So tzaddik v'rosha, whether you be devoutly righteous or evil, that's up to the initiative of the person. Therefore, Rambam in the Laws of Tshuva says that if a person is a tzaddik, he's only a tzaddik because he took the initiative to be the tzaddik. It's not natural. It's only due to his initiative, and because it's due to his initiative, therefore he's deserving of whatever good he chooses to do. And if, God forbid, he goes south, negative, why did he do negative? He wasn't compelled to do negative. It's because it was his decision to do something which is a transgression, which is what we call an aveir. It's a sin. That's the concept. So what is the purpose and value of a human being if everything's predetermined? The value of a person is whether you do good or evil, which is not natural, that's only due to one's initiative. Do you succeed, do you fail? And that's what we're here for. The world itself is a proving grounds. All the challenges of life that we're confronted with, it's within our ability to deal with them positively and negatively. And after as many years as you're endowed to live, it will be determined what is your record. Is the majority of your record positive or negative? And whether negative or positive will determine what your classification is. If you're tzaddik or rosha, devoutly righteous or evil. Rambam writes that if the majority of one's value is positive, he's classified as a tzaddik, even though the minority is negative. If the majority is negative, his classification is rosha. But he says this quantification is not quantitative evaluation, it's qualitative evaluation. What does that mean? Rambam says sometimes you could have multiple sins, and you have one mitzvah. That one mitzvah has greater value than endless amount of sins. So the only one who has the capacity and the capability to make this spiritual evaluation is only God, who knows everything, and he will make that determination, that evaluation, whether the person's a tzaddik or rosha. Those are the words of Rambam. So you have a person, seems to be an ordinary person, but in God's eyes, he's not ordinary, because he may have done certain things which were so outstanding that one good deed overweighs all his levels of failing. The Gemara tells a story. This person passed away for a short period of time and came back to life. So his father said to him, when you saw what's going on in the world to come, what did you see? So he said, I saw, I'll say it first in Hebrew, and then I'll translate it. Elyonim lamato v'tachtonim lamalo. He saw those who in this world who were exalted or seen on an exalted level, I see them lamato. Those in this world who are on top of the totem pole, in the world to come are on the bottom of the totem pole. And those in this world who are on the bottom of the totem pole, they're on top of the totem pole. So why is that? Because evaluation, it's not only because they're concealed. It's because, again, how do we make this evaluation? The world may quantify you and put you on a pedestal. But that's the world's pedestal. God has another pedestal. And only God is able to make that evaluation. So therefore, the classification, tzaddik v'rosh, is up to who? Is up to God. Now, so what is the value of a person's existence? Free choice. We're given the ability, based on our challenges, to have choice. Now we have a mitzvah. First mitzvah discussed in this portion. We have an obligation that every community should install a court. A court means judges that are ordained with the nation of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is a special qualification, and also law enforcers to guarantee that that verdict is carried out. If the judge rules that somebody's guilty and he must pay, what happens if he chooses not to pay? How does the judge enforce it? He doesn't have the ability to enforce it. But if you have law enforcers, they're the agents of the court, they will make sure that person pays. Because through physical force, they can actually institute whatever punishment or whatever level of liability has to be put into reality, and they will guarantee that the verdict of the court is actually carried out. So there's a discussion in Sanhedrin, how many Jews have to live in a community that you have an obligation to install a court. One opinion is if you have 120 Jews living in a community, you must have this profile, this infrastructure of that community. A Beis Din, a rabbinic court with law enforcers. Another opinion is you must have 240 Jews. But whatever you want to say, what happens, in fact, you have a court and you have law enforcers, and a person chooses to cross certain lines, which is not permitted as a Jew. What happens? He's going to be reined in on. There's certain punishment, which is penalty, which hurts you in the pocketbook. There's another penalty, which is called lashes. You're whipped. Maximally for violating a negative command once, if it's proactive, it's 39 lashes. Now, what happens if a person gets lashes? He's whipped. Could you imagine a person being whipped 39 times over different parts of his body? He's going to be incapacitated minimally for a few months, maybe for a year, after he's whipped. That's for eating a small amount of non-kosher, if you're forewarned. And nobody in his right mind who is rational cross that line. It's not worth it. If I put a gun against your temple and I say, you cross that line, I'll pull the trigger. Anybody who's rational and stable will not cross that line. God says, I want you to set an infrastructure in every community that Jews have almost no wiggle room. Because if you wiggle a little bit, actually you get pierced. You get semi-destroyed. So let me ask you a question. If the reason why mankind was endowed with free choice, that they should be the beneficiary of doing the right thing, due to their own initiative, and not due to the wrong thing, due to their own initiative, why are we deserving of credit if God institutes such an infrastructure where it's almost impossible to do the wrong thing unless you sin on the QT when nobody knows what you're doing. But anything which becomes known to a third party, the court finds out about it, they're going to rule, and if they rule on that and you're found guilty, the law enforcers will rein in on you. So seemingly this positive commandment of establishing the judicial system in every community, every little town, every little village, with this kind of court, which has the ability to actually discipline people on many levels, even to rule on death penalty, how much room does it leave us to be for free choice? That's the question. If free choice is the value of a human being over an unintelligent creature, because their function is purely instinctive, Our function is mainly through choice, decision-making. So if that's the case, what is the special characteristic quality of free choice? If basically we don't have much choice but to do what God wants. Of course, it's not worth to go do something which is contrary to the will of God. No rational person would behave that way. That's the question. So now, we read in last week's reading that Moshe says to the Jewish people, you're God's children. The Jewish people are God's children. What does that mean? He's God's children. And he says, Moshe, just as a father.
Who's there?
A second. Just as a father disciplines a child, and when the father disciplines even through physical force, it's not meant to hurt the child. It's only meant to discipline the child, to bring the child back on track. Identically, when God punishes you, it's purely for disciplinary value, not for any other reason. To alert you and wake you up to take the proper path. So the Rechaim HaKodesh asks the question, how do we understand this? The child says to his father, you're disciplining me for doing the wrong thing. What about all these other people doing the wrong thing? Why don't you rein in on them? So the father says to the child, you don't understand. You're my child. They're not my children. Because you're my child, I'm responsible to raise you appropriately as you should be raised. The others, they're not my children. Therefore, ultimately, are they going to be culpable for their misbehavior? Yes. But I have no reason to rein in on them. When there's time to rein in, I will rein in. But you, my child, I don't want you to go off track. And therefore, the moment you go off track, immediately I rein in on you. And it manifests itself in many levels. Financial, physical, mental, whatever it may be. Displacement, whatever that may be. Now, at Sinai, what happened? We were the only one who accepted the Torah. We agreed to be God's people. We became the princely, kingly nation of God. That means every Jew, what's his classification? Every Jew is royalty. Every Jew, in God's eyes, is royalty. If the prince wants to behave like the common, which is a desecration and a disgrace to his status, because he's the son of the king, what does the king do? The king will not allow it. Even if it means he will not allow him out of the palace. And if he does do the wrong thing, he's going to rain on him very seriously, that if he left the palace grounds, he'll never do it again, because he'll cause him that level of pain, because he's the prince. The gardener who leaves the palace grounds, he can behave whatever he wants outside the palace. He's the gardener, he's not the prince. The cook, the bottle washer, he's not the prince. He could behave in a way which the prince can't behave. Because one, it's beneath him. He's desecrating. He's tarnishing who he is. He's minimizing who he is. Because you're God's children. God is not going to allow you to be a murderer, to be an adulterer, to commit incest, to blaspheme God. He's not going to put up with this. And if the few who choose to, they're going to be reined in on. And they're going to be, and therefore it's going to be a public deterrent. When people see God's reaction to this kind of behavior, the other children are not going to misbehave. Because that person was made into an example. But why? Because God wants a certain standard for the Jewish people. So what's our standard? Our standard is to abide by all positive and negative commandments. But if that's the case, we have no choice but to do it. Because doing differently is being irrational. So why is the accomplished accredited to us? The answer is this. Put on tefillin. Why do you put on tefillin? Why do you do the mitzvah? Do you do the mitzvah for the sake of God? Or you do the mitzvah with an ulterior motive? You do it with an ulterior motive, that mitzvah is done in a very deficient state. You do it for the sake of God, would infuse it with love, with reverence For God's sake, it's a whole different dimension of mitzvah. You can do the mitzvah for humanitarian reasons, or you do it for spiritual reasons, for spiritual advancement. That is the choice of the Jew. The choice of the Jew is not to do and not to do. The choice to do is when you do, you do it with the right intent. That's the choice. But anything less than minimal, God says is not acceptable. Not acceptable. The court will rein in on you. The law enforcer will impose and institute whatever the verdict of the court is. Because you are God's children. You are princely. You are the kingly princely nation, which we have this bond since Sinai. That was the Sinai event. Therefore, God says, my children, I hold them to a different standard than the world. The world is not held to our standard whatsoever. So it's interesting. In the eyes of the world, Jews are held to a different standard. Israel's held to another standard than the Arabs. If the Jew does one wrong thing, he's immediately condemned by the UN and by all the nations of the world. But they're only responding to what? Well, we hold you to a higher standard. Continuously we're held to a higher standard. You'd say it's not fair. It's not fair. Well, if the world holds you to a higher standard, you don't think God should hold you to a higher standard? Because that's, even though they don't understand why, but the Jew has a certain innate representation of something which they can't process the world, but they know they have to be held to a higher standard. So if the world is holding us to a higher standard, you say, well, it's not fair. God holds it on a higher standard, and that's very fair. Because to be able to maximize on our potential, God will not allow you to go beyond a certain line. Those are the safety measures. That's the understanding. Because what's the objective? What's the objective of life for the Jew, or what's the objective of life for a non-Jew? The objective of life for a Jew is that after we leave this world, is to cleave to God, to have that very intimate relation with God. If that's the case, you can only have that relation with God only if you achieve that very special level of accomplishment. The non-Jew, that's not his share in the world to come, even if he succeeds. But that's the 7 Noahide laws. It's not the 613 precepts, 248 positive and 365 negative. It's a different reality. As a result of that, because of that, of the nature of relationship, you're held to another standard. We're in the inner sanctums. The non-Jew is not within the inner sanctums of the world to come. Therefore, he's in the hinterlands, and he can behave the way he wants wherever he is. Ultimately, he's going to pay the price if he crossed lines that he shouldn't have crossed. I'll give you an example. The Torah speaks about various levels of liability. One level of liability is you're cut off from God. For instance, a person eats on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a very serious day, very solemn day, and you must keep all the laws of Shabbos on Yom Kippur. And one of the laws is you're not permitted to eat and drink. If a person eats and drinks Yom Kippur, what's the level of liability? Spiritual excision. You're cut off from God. So the question is asked, wherever you find the Torah discussing spiritual excision, it says, and that soul should be cut off from his people, or that soul should be cut off from Israel. But if spiritual excision is you have no relevance to God because you severed your relation with God, you terminate your relationship, the Torah, when it speaks about this level of liability, says that soul would be cut off from God. Why does it say he's cut off from the people? Or he's cut off from the Jewish people? Why don't we be more specific in the reality of what it is? So we explained in the past that God has no relationship with individuals. The last time God had relationship with individuals were the patriarchs. This is before there was a Jewish people. God had a personal relationship with Avram. He had a relationship with Yitzchak. He had a relationship with Yaakov. As we say, Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. The God of each one of them, because they were individuals. They're the founding fathers. Once there's a Jewish people, if you're part of the people, God has a relationship with you. If you're not part of Jewish people, he has no relationship with you. So how does spiritual excision manifest itself? You take it out, you no longer spoke in the wheel. If you no longer spoke in the wheel, then God has nothing to do with you. That's the understanding why whenever we speak about spiritual excision, it speaks about the person being excised from the people. He's not excised from God. A consequence of that is, if you're no longer seen as part of Jewish people, you have no relation with God, because God only has a relationship with what? With people who are part of the Jewish people. Now, the Rambam rules, if a person observes the whole Torah's entirety, almost, but he sees himself as not as part of the Jewish people. He says, my successes are my successes, my setbacks are my setbacks, and yours are yours. He doesn't identify as a Jew, although he keeps all the commandments, doesn't violate negative commandments. Rambam says this person has no share in the world to come. So the question is why? He's fully, devoutly observant. The only thing he doesn't do, he has nothing to do with Jews. He doesn't identify as a Jew. But he identifies with the Torah. He identifies with positive and negative commandments. Why doesn't he have a share in the world to come? This is called Porush Min HaTzibur. The answer is very simple, as we're explaining. You want to have a relation with God as an individual, there's no such thing. If you're part of the whole, you can have a relation with God, because you're a representative of the totality of the Jewish people. But if you don't see yourself as part of the whole, you see yourself as independent of the whole, that's the case, you have no relation with God. Therefore, a person is a Porush Min HaTzibur. He severs himself from the Jewish community and lives all alone by himself. I'm not talking in location, but as he has no relevance to connection to Jewish people, that person has no share in the world to come. That's the understanding. So what does God expect of his people? The people who are designated as his children, as his royalty. He expects a certain level of conduct, moral, ethical, and spiritual behavior. Anything less than that is not acceptable. It's not even available to you, even to consider it. Now, how do you somehow push out all this other stuff? You have courts and you have law enforcement. Now, people say, so what about today? When we speak about exile, the Jews have been exiled for 2,000 years since the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, second temple. What's exile? You know what exile is? We no longer have our own country. We're under the heel of the world, the nations of the world. We're discriminated. We're persecuted. We have Holocaust. We have pogroms. We're under their heel, literally. That's exile. But you know what exile is? Exile is that you don't live within your own parameters to be able to be held at higher standards. So a consequence of exile is that the whole infrastructure of the Jewish community just falls apart. Once it falls apart, that means you have nothing spiritually holding you together. Therefore, the Jew ultimately violates the Shabbos. He doesn't keep dietary laws. Because now, what's stopping the influences of the world that person should not acclimate himself to whatever the norms of society is? Before that, you weren't permitted even to go there, because the court would not allow you. And the law enforcement would guarantee that, to set the parameters. But today, who sets parameters? The court's rulings fall on deaf ears, the rabbinic court. Means nothing. So a consequence of golus, of exile, is not only in the physical sense, the most serious and severe level of exile is in the spiritual sense. Assimilation. All this wasn't possible if we'd have courts and we'd have law enforcement. These things are not even to be considered. It's only once you go out the door and you're in free fall, you never know where you're going to land. If you can land on your feet, you can land on your head, or you're going to end up in inferno to be totally vaporized and incinerated. Ask the question.
Yes, Rabbi. So you mentioned earlier about people not having a personal relationship with God, and you have to be a part of the people. So the question becomes, we stand when a tzaddik walks in the room, or a teacher, or a rabbi, a learned person, do they have a different relationship with God, or we are all on the same plane relative to our relationship with God? And then what are we honoring when we stand for that?
Okay. You know, you go to a ball game, right? And you have bleachers, you have middle of the row seats, you have box seats, and then you have whatever they call, you have your own private like location. You're all within the ballpark. Questions: where are you in the ballpark? Are you in the back row, middle row, front row, or even more than that? And that's what it's about. Everybody's a spoke in the wheel. You have a body. You have different organs, inner organs. You have veins, you have arteries. You have internal organs, you have a heart. In the heart, you have certain valves which are more essential than other valves. You have lungs. You have a liver. You have ducts. I mean, everything else. Each one has different, you need all of them to function as a totality of a human being. You have kidneys, but each one provides a certain essential, which is more essential than other things. The tzaddik has a representation within the totality, which is a greater level of representation because he contributes more. He's more essential to the whole thing. He may be a spoke in the wheel, but what about the rim of the wheel? You can have all the spokes in the world. There's no rim to put those spokes into the rim that wheel doesn't turn. So you have to have a rim, and the rim has to be what? Strong enough that it doesn't collapse on the weight that's put on that rim. And for that, it depends on how strong the spokes are. So if you have key spokes which are strong, it's going to hold that rim together. And they have to be placed in certain strategic places. Otherwise, it collapses. There's a midrash. There's a verse in Tehillim, which we say every morning in Shachris. At the end of one of the halukos, Magid Rov Yaakov. He spoke his words. He told over his words to Jacob. Chukav Mishpot Yisrael, his statutes and his laws to the Jewish people. He spoke his words to Jacob, or he told over his words to Jacob, and his statutes and laws Israel for the Jewish people. What's Dvarov? Elo Divrei Torah. Dvarov is the written law. Every word of written law that was directly, those are God's words. Chukav, what's Chukav? Ela Midrashos. That's the Midrash. Mishpotov, what's Mishpotov? These are definitive laws. Ela Dinim, those are the laws of the Torah. Medrash means to understand the perspective. Mishpotov is not perspective, it is what the reality is. How do you rule on this situation? How do you evaluate this situation? That's the laws. God at Sinai only gave the Torah and its laws, its rational laws, only to Jewish people. Minayin to Lamed. Where do we learn this from? A Jew and non-Jew, they have a lawsuit against one another. It has to be adjudicated. Where do they go? I'll take you to court. We'll go to a secular court together. The Jew is not permitted to say that. And if he does that, he's in violation of negative commandment. What he provided for us, he did not provide for any other nation. What does that mean? And the laws, the non-Jew is totally devoid of those laws. So the Midrash asks, a non-Jew is bound by the law as a Jew is bound by the law. A Jew is not permitted to steal, a non-Jew is not permitted to steal. A non-Jew is not permitted to damage, a Jew is not permitted to damage. A Jew is not permitted to commit murder, a non-Jew is not permitted to commit murder. So if that's the case, what do you mean? The laws, these laws are unique to the Jews, and therefore, even to adjudicate that kind of law, we're not permitted to go to a secular court. The question is, why not? The law of judicial system function is one of the 7 Noahide laws. So what does it mean? But the laws, these rash laws, they've been kept in the dark in terms of their actual application. What does that mean? These are defined, these are the nuances of these laws. What is that? Now, when witnesses come to testify, they have to be interrogated. Firstly, for 2 reasons. Firstly, to make sure that what they're testifying, they saw it accurately. It wasn't hearsay or probability, but they saw it firsthand as they were supposed to see it. And there are many other levels of questioning they have. And if you have 2 witnesses, and after the interrogation, the responses are not the same to the questions that were asked, that means there's a discrepancy in the testimony. If that's the case, one witness did not see what the other witness said. If that's the case, these witnesses don't stand on their own anymore. They're both disqualified. Now, this is the difference. If a non-Jew committed murder, according to Noahide laws, a single witness is sufficient to put that person to death. You have one judge is enough. We have 27 judges. It has a semblance of the High Court. Shlo Basra, a non-Jew, when he violates him, doesn't have to be forewarned. When he does the wrong thing, he's reined in upon. Mashenki B'Yisrael, which is not the case by Jews. Vishedini Momonos B'Shlosha. What's a court that's qualified to rule on money, monetary issues? 3 is enough. You don't need more than 3. V'dini Foshos, and if it's a capital crime, Be'esim B'Shlosha. You need 23 judges. Shenemar, Yechsiv, Lo Yukom Eirechot, Utzrichin Shishich Hakira. They have to be interrogated. Without interrogation, judges are not qualified to testify for many reasons. Okay? Now, initially, why did God give a judicial system to mankind? For what reason? Initially, God wanted to create the world with the attribute of justice, that he would be the judge. There'd be divine justice, except God saw that the world cannot survive divine justice. It's too precise, and the consequences too severe. So what did he do? He gave over this real realm of responsibility to the mortal, that they should supervise their own society. And if people cross those lines, they have to rein in on them. They institute punishment. That's called human justice. It's not divine justice. Divine justice, we saw what happened at the time of the Great Flood. The world was destroyed. Divine justice, we saw what happened to the camp of Sancherib. In one swoop, millions of troops were killed, were literally incinerated. That's too harsh for the world. The court has to deliberate. The court has to rule. And we're talking about small numbers. Not God's judgment is global, or minimally location-wise, nationwide. So what the court rules on, the Jewish court, there's no compromise in truth, except the consequences is different. The decision, the verdict is different. That it would be divide, even for the slightest infraction, the liability can be lethal. And the human court, which is the rabbinic court, which they're ordained with a special level of ordination, they have to be in violation, something very extreme, to be liable for the death penalty, such as committing adultery, blaspheming God. These are the things that are punishable by death. Okay? And the Midrash shows multiple sources that if judgment, if the courts are not equitable courts, ultimately the Jews go into exile. God will not tolerate an existence that has no justice. Justice is a foundation, a fundamental of existence. And the moment justice is compromised, the world comes to an end. Why? Because again, the terrestrial court, the court of the mortals, was supposed to be in place of divine justice. But if God says and sees the mortal doesn't behave correctly, they're corrupt, and they're not equitable decisions, God says, so what's your value? You're supposed to be my replacement. Instead of my judgment, which is divine, but it's precise, yours has to be precise on the human level, based on the criteria that's met by the court, by the Torah. Therefore, God says, if that's the case, you'll be destroyed. You can go into exile. Because the world needs justice. Without justice, the world cannot function. I think we're going to stop here today. We'll continue tomorrow. If there are any questions, I'll entertain them right now.